The kitchen on Space Station New Geneva smelled like home. June Park wiped sweat from his forehead as he checked the kimchi one last time. The fermented cabbage had the perfect sour bite that reminded him of his grandmother's recipe. Steam rose from dozens of pots and pans where Korean dishes bubbled and sizzled. "Chef June, the bulgogi smells amazing," said Tae Lee, his young assistant. The 19-year-old had joined the embassy kitchen only 6 months ago, but his enthusiasm made up for his lack of experience. June smiled and nodded. "My grandmother always said good food speaks louder than words. Today we show the galaxy what Earth cooking really means." The Galactic Culinary Summit happened only once every 5 years. Representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered to share their food traditions. For most species, it was just an interesting cultural exchange. For humans, it was their first chance to prove they belonged among the stars. Hana Kim rushed into the kitchen, her diplomatic uniform wrinkled from running. "June, they moved our presentation up by an hour. The Vorthak delegation requested to go after us." "Why the change?" June asked, carefully lifting a steamer full of mandu dumplings. Each dumpling was folded perfectly, filled with pork and vegetables that had been seasoned just right. Ambassador Vexthar said something about wanting to demonstrate proper cuisine. After the humans finished, Hana frowned. "I don't like his tone." Miracho looked up from her translation tablet. "The Vorthak have been making comments about human food all week. Nothing direct, but lots of whispers about primitive cooking methods." June had heard the whispers too. The crystalline beings from Vorthak Prime considered themselves the most advanced species in the galaxy. Their food was geometric perfection. Mineral formations that provided exact nutrition with mathematical precision. They looked down on any cuisine that relied on what they called chaos and emotion. "Let them whisper," June said quietly. "Food will speak for itself." Davy Song entered, carrying the last of the serving platters. The security officer had volunteered to help when he learned about the presentation. "The main hall is packed. I counted representatives from at least 50 different species." June felt his stomach tighten. He had cooked for important people before, but never for an entire galaxy. Everything had to be perfect. These dishes represented not just Korea, but all of Earth's rich food traditions. "Remember the plan," Hana said to everyone. "We start with banchan, the small side dishes, then soup, then the main courses. The mandu comes last as our signature dish." Tai carefully arranged the banchan on small plates. Kimchi, pickled radish, seasoned spinach, bean sprouts, each one a different color and flavor that would work together like a symphony. "My grandmother made banchan like this every day. She said a meal without banchan was like a song without harmony." The team loaded their carts and headed to the main presentation hall. The massive space was filled with beings June had only seen in pictures. Tall, blue-skinned Andromedans stood next to small, furry creatures from the outer rim. Energy beings flickered and shifted while insectoid delegates clicked their mandibles in conversation. At the center of the hall stood 3 raised platforms. The Vorthak had already set up their display, perfect crystal formations that glowed with inner light. The Glimari energy beings had created floating spheres of pure light that pulsed with different colors. The Krulon Collective had arranged their food in precise geometric patterns that seemed to shift and change as you watched. The human platform looked simple in comparison, just tables with white cloths, metal serving dishes, and chopsticks. But when June began uncovering the food, something magical happened. The rich, complex smells of Korean cuisine filled the air. Representatives from dozens of species turned their heads. Some had no noses, but they had other ways of sensing the chemical complexity of human cooking. The mixture of fermented, grilled, and seasoned foods created layers of aroma that was completely different from anything else in the hall. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings," Hana announced through the translation system. The Earth delegation presents the culinary traditions of Korea, representing the diverse food culture of humanity. June began explaining each dish as judges from neutral species came forward to taste. He talked about how kimchi was created by Korean ancestors who needed to preserve vegetables through harsh winters, how the fermentation process created beneficial bacteria and complex flavors that changed over time. A judge from the Centauri system took a small bite of bulgogi. His 4 eyes widened as he chewed the marinated beef. The flavor combinations are very complex. How do you achieve such balance? Practice. And love? June answered simply. Each family has their own recipe passed down through generations. My grandmother taught me that cooking is not just about feeding the body, but feeding the heart. That was when Ambassador Vexithar stepped forward. The Vorthak leader was 8 feet tall, his crystalline body refracting light into rainbow patterns. His voice resonated like breaking glass when he spoke. Honored judges, I must express concern about what we are witnessing here. Vexithar gestured toward the human food with what could only be described as disgust. This chaotic mixture of organic compounds demonstrates the primitive nature of human cuisine. There is no structure, no mathematical precision, no logical flavor progression. June felt his hands start to shake, but he kept his voice steady. Our food reflects our culture. Diverse, creative, adaptable. Exactly my point, Vexthar continued. Proper cuisine should elevate consciousness through perfect nutritional harmony. This organic slop appeals only to base instincts. It is chaos masquerading as culture. Lumina Prime, the Glimari representative, floated closer. Her energy form pulsed with cold blue light. The Vorthak speaks truth. Human food lacks energetic harmony. Your species has undeveloped palates that cannot appreciate pure nutritional transcendence. The Krulon Collective's voice was like 1,000 whispers speaking in unison. Individual taste preferences create chaos. True cuisine requires synchronized experience. Human food celebrates disharmony and individual weakness. June felt each word like a physical blow. These beings weren't just criticizing his cooking, they were attacking everything he loved about food culture. The memory of his grandmother's kitchen, the joy of sharing meals with family, the pride of cultural traditions passed down through centuries. Hana stepped forward diplomatically. Every species has different approaches to cuisine. Diversity should be celebrated, not condemned. Diversity built on ignorance is not worth celebrating, Vexthar replied coldly. Humans know only salt, fat, and heat applied without understanding. This is not cuisine. It is primitive survival behavior. The other alien delegates began nodding in agreement. Some species that had been interested in trying human food now stepped away from their platform. Whispers spread through the crowd. Words like primitive, chaotic, undeveloped. June looked down at his hands, still trembling with suppressed anger. These dishes represented everything important to him. His grandmother had taught him to cook during the hardest times, when food was scarce but love was abundant. Every recipe carried stories, memories, connections to generations of Korean families who had found joy and comfort in sharing meals. Tae moved closer to June, his young face angry. Should we respond to them, chef? June looked at the last steamer, of mandu, still warming on the side table. His grandmother's special recipe, the dumplings that had made grown men cry with homesickness and happiness, the ones that told the story of survival, creativity, and love in every perfectly pleated fold. Yes, June said quietly, his voice gaining strength. We respond, but not with words. He walked to the steamer and lifted the lid. Steam escaped, carrying with it the aroma of pork, vegetables, and memories. The smell of home, of family gatherings, of celebration and comfort all mixed together. Tae, Mira, Davy, start preparing the emergency ingredients. We have work to do. What kind of work? Hana asked, recognizing the determined look in June's eyes. June smiled for the first time since the insults began, the kind that settles arguments once and for all. These beings think they understand food, but they have never tasted what love and memory can create. As the alien delegates continued their dismissive comments about human cuisine, June began, rolling up his sleeves. Tomorrow, he would show them what real cooking could accomplish. The last dumpling war was about to begin. The next morning, June woke up angry. He had spent the night thinking about the insults from Ambassador Vexthar and the other alien delegates. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard their words echoing in his mind. Primitive, chaotic, undeveloped. The embassy kitchen felt different when he arrived. Tay was already there, chopping vegetables with more force than necessary. His knife hit the cutting board with sharp, angry sounds. "Did you see the galactic news reports?" Tay asked without looking up. "They are calling human food a joke. 1. Reporter said we should stick to basic nutrition and stop pretending we have real cuisine." Mira entered carrying her translation tablet, her face grim. "It gets worse. The Andromedans canceled their cultural exchange dinner with us. The Centauri delegation requested different quarters because they don't want to smell human cooking. Even some of the neutral species are avoiding our section of the station." June felt his jaw clench. This was more than just food criticism. This was an attack on human dignity, on their right to be respected members of the galactic community. He had worked his entire life to perfect his craft, learning from the best chefs on Earth and carrying forward traditions that stretched back thousands of years. Hana rushed in, still in her sleeping clothes. "June, you need to see this." She activated the wall screen, showing the morning diplomatic briefing. A tall, blue Andromedan reporter was interviewing Ambassador Vexthar. The crystalline being's form sparkled under the studio lights as he spoke with complete confidence. "The human presentation yesterday demonstrated exactly why primitive species should focus on survival rather than culture," Vexthar said. "True, cuisine requires mathematical precision, logical flavor architecture, and evolutionary advancement. Humans are simply not ready for sophisticated culinary arts." The reporter nodded. Some observers noted that the human food smelled quite strong. "Is this typical of undeveloped cuisine?" "Completely typical," Vexthar replied. "Strong smells are used to mask poor ingredients and sloppy preparation. Advanced species like the Vorthak have moved beyond such primitive techniques." June turned off the screen. His hands were shaking again, but this time it was not from fear. It was from pure determination. "That is enough," he said quietly. "We are not going to let them destroy our reputation without a fight." "What can we do?" Davy asked as he entered the kitchen. The security officer looked tired, having spent the night dealing with complaints from other delegations about human cooking smells. "Diplomatically, we are in a difficult position. We cannot start conflicts with major galactic powers over food." June walked to the spice cabinet and pulled out a small jar of his grandmother's secret seasoning blend. The mixture had been passed down through 5 generations of his family. Each cook had added their own touch, creating something that was both traditional and unique. "We challenge them," June said simply. "Challenge who?" Hana asked. "All of them. The Vorthak, the Glimari, the Krulon Collective. Any species that thinks human cuisine is primitive." June set the jar on the counter with a determined thud. "A formal cooking competition. Best dish wins. Losers admit they were wrong and apologize publicly." The kitchen fell silent. Even the bubbling pots seemed to quiet down as everyone processed what June was suggesting. "That is incredibly risky," Mira said slowly. "If we lose, it confirms everything they said about us. Human cuisine would become a galactic joke forever." "And if we win?" Tay asked, his eyes beginning to light up with excitement. "If we win, we prove that human food culture deserves respect," June replied. We show the galaxy that there is more than one way to create something beautiful and meaningful. Hana sat down heavily on a kitchen stool. As the diplomatic attaché, she understood the political implications better than anyone. The risk is enormous. These species have been perfecting their cuisine for thousands of years. The Vorthak have mathematical precision we cannot match. The Glimari work with pure energy. The Krulon collective shares a hive mind that creates perfect harmony. But they do not have what we have, June said, walking to the window that looked out over the station's central plaza. Beings from dozens of species moved through the space below, but they moved separately. Vorthak walked with Vorthak, Glimmery floated with their own kind, Krulon moved in their synchronized groups. What do we have that they do not? Davy asked. June turned back to his team. Heart, memory, the ability to take simple ingredients and transform them into something that connects people across time and space. When I cook my grandmother's recipes, I am not just making food. I am keeping alive the love she had for her family, the struggles she overcame, the joy she found in feeding others. He walked to the refrigeration unit and pulled out ingredients. For mandu, flour, pork, cabbage, onions, garlic. Simple things that cost very little but could feed a family and fill their hearts with warmth. They think complexity comes from mathematical formulas and perfect ratios, June continued. But real complexity comes from generations of people adding their own touch to a recipe, adapting it to new circumstances, sharing it with strangers who become family. Tay slammed his knife into the cutting board one final time. I am in. Let them try to match flavors that carry 5,000 years of Korean cooking tradition. The diplomatic corps will not be happy, Mira warned. This could damage relations with major galactic powers. Relations are already damaged, Davi pointed out. At least this way, we fight back with dignity instead of just accepting insults. Hana stood up slowly. If we do this, we need to be smart about it. The challenge has to be formal, with neutral judges and clear rules. We cannot give them any excuse to claim unfairness. Agreed, June said. We propose a proper culinary competition. Each species prepares their finest dish. Judges from non-participating species taste everything and vote. Winner takes all. And if they refuse the challenge? Mira asked. June smiled for the first time in 24 hours. Then everyone in the galaxy knows they are afraid of human cooking. Within an hour, Hana had drafted the formal challenge. The document was precise and diplomatic, but the message was clear. The human delegation challenged any species that questioned their culinary abilities to prove their superiority in open competition. The response came faster than expected. Ambassador Vexthar accepted immediately, stating that the Vorthak would be happy to demonstrate proper cuisine after disposing of human pretensions. The Glimari agreed, claiming their energy-based food would transcend anything organic beings could create. The Krulon collective joined, confident that their hive mind coordination would produce perfect harmony that individuals could never match. By afternoon, news of the challenge had spread throughout the station. Beings who had ignored human food yesterday were now placing bets on the outcome. The galactic media declared it the most interesting cultural event in decades. 2 days to prepare, Hana announced as she returned from registering the competition with station authorities. Neutral judges from 5 different species, public tasting in the main amphitheater. June nodded and began making a list of ingredients. This would be more than just cooking. This would be cultural warfare fought with flavors instead of weapons. What is our strategy? Tay asked. June looked at his team. These people had become like family over the past months. Tay with his enthusiasm and willingness to learn, Hana with her diplomatic skills and fierce loyalty, Mira with her language, abilities and cultural knowledge, Davi with his quiet strength and surprising gentleness. We cook with everything we have, June said. Not just ingredients, but memories, stories, love. We show them that food is not just about nutrition or even flavor. It is about connection, about turning strangers into family around a shared table. That evening, as the team planned their menu, June called his grandmother on Earth. The old woman's face appeared on the communication screen, wrinkled but sharp-eyed. "Grandmother, I need your help," June said in Korean. "I have been watching the galactic news," she replied. "These aliens think they know about cooking? They have never had to feed 8 children with 1 chicken and whatever vegetables they could grow in bad soil." She paused, studying her grandson's face through the screen. "You want the special mandu recipe, the one I made for your grandfather when he came back from the war?" "Yes, grandmother. That recipe is not just about ingredients, June. It is about healing, about welcome home, about second chances and new beginnings." Her eyes grew soft with memory. "Your grandfather cried when he tasted those dumplings, not because they were perfect, but because they told him he was loved." The next morning, June began preparations with a clear purpose. He was not just defending human cuisine. He was fighting for the idea that food could carry love across space and time, that simple ingredients combined with care and tradition could create something more beautiful than mathematical perfection. The battle would be won, or lost in the kitchen, but the war was for the soul of what cooking really meant. 48 hours. That was all the time June had to prepare for the most important cooking competition of his life. The embassy kitchen had become a war room, with ingredients spread across every surface and team members working around the clock. "Tell me again why we decided to make 7 courses instead of just one amazing dish," Tae said as he carefully measured fermentation temperatures for his experimental kimchi. Dark circles under his eyes showed he had not slept much. "Because we are not just feeding their bodies," June replied, kneading dumpling dough with steady, practiced motions. "We are telling the story of humanity through food. Each course represents something important about who we are." The menu they had planned was ambitious: kimchi to show adaptation and preservation, soup to demonstrate comfort and healing, bulgogi to represent celebration and community, banchan to prove that simple things could be extraordinary when made with care, and finally, the mandu dumplings that would carry the full weight of human emotion and tradition. Mira looked up from her research tablet. "I have been studying alien taste biology all night. This is fascinating. The Vorthak have only 12 taste receptors compared to our 25,000 taste buds. The Glimari do not actually taste food at all. They absorb energy patterns. The Krulon share taste experiences through their hive mind, so they experience flavor as a collective rather than individually." "What does that mean for us?" Davy asked. He was practicing dumpling folding techniques, his security training making him surprisingly good at the precise, repetitive motions. "It means they experience food completely differently than humans," Mira continued. "They have been judging our cuisine by their own limited standards, but humans can taste and smell combinations they cannot even detect." Hana entered the kitchen carrying fresh herbs from the station's hydroponic gardens. "The other teams are working just as hard." I walked past the Vorthak preparation area. "They have built some kind of crystalline cooking device that calculates exact mineral ratios. Very impressive looking." "What about the others?" June asked. "The Glimari have created a laboratory where they are weaving energy patterns into consumable light. The Krulon Collective is working in perfect synchronization. 50 individuals moving like one organism to create their dishes." June felt a moment of doubt. How could traditional cooking methods compete with such advanced techniques? Then he remembered his grandmother's words about feeding 8 children with 1 chicken. Sometimes the greatest strength came from making the most of simple things. "Let them have their calculations and energy patterns," he said. "We have something they do not understand." "What is that?" Tae asked. "Improvisation. The ability to taste as we cook and adjust. To add a pinch more salt because the dish needs it, not because a formula says so. To cook with our hearts as well as our hands." As the hours passed, Something magical began happening in the human kitchen. Tae's experimental kimchi was developing flavors that none of them had tasted before. By combining traditional fermentation with preservation techniques he had learned from other cultures on the station, he was creating layers of complexity that built on each other like music. "Taste this," Tae said, offering June a small sample. June chewed thoughtfully. The familiar sour tang of kimchi was there, but underneath were deeper notes, umami flavors that seemed to awaken new taste sensations. "How did you achieve this?" "I remembered something you said about adaptation," Tae replied. "Korean cooking has always changed when it met new ingredients and techniques. So I adapted our fermentation process using methods I learned from a trader from the Centauri system, not to copy their food, but to enhance ours." Davy held up a perfectly pleated dumpling. "I think I finally understand why the folding pattern matters. It is not just about making them look pretty. The folds control how the dough cooks and how the filling flavors blend together." "Exactly," June said proudly. "Every fold has a purpose, like every ingredient, every technique, every tradition we use." Meanwhile, Mira had made another discovery. "I have been analyzing the judge selection for tomorrow. The neutral species, chosen, have much more sophisticated taste systems than our competitors. The Xanthari have taste organs that can detect molecular structures. The Kef can taste emotions and memories attached to food. The Vraxi experience flavor in 4 dimensions." "Is that good or bad for us?" Hana asked. "Very good," Mira said with excitement. "These judges will be able to experience everything we put into our food, not just the flavors, but the care, the tradition, the love. The other teams are preparing for basic taste and nutrition. We are preparing for judges who can experience the full depth of what we create." Late that night, as the team took their first real break in 36 hours, they sat around the kitchen table sharing a simple meal: rice, kimchi, and leftover bulgogi. Nothing fancy, but after hours of intense work, it tasted perfect. "You know what I realized today?" Davi said between bites. "I have been a security officer for 8 years, and this is the most important mission I have ever been part of. Not because of politics or diplomacy, but because we are fighting for the right to be respected for who we are. Food is our culture," Tae added. "When they insult our cooking, they insult our grandmothers, our traditions, our way of showing love to each other." June nodded. "That is why we cannot lose tomorrow. Not just for us, but for every human who has ever found comfort in a home-cooked meal, who has ever showed love by sharing food, who has ever gathered family around a table." As they prepared to get a few hours of sleep before the final day of preparation, June made one last check of his ingredients. The dumplings would be made fresh tomorrow, but everything else needed to be ready. The bulgogi marinade had been developing flavors for 2 days now. The soup base was rich with bones that had been simmered for 18 hours. The banchan vegetables had been pickled and seasoned to perfection. But the real secret weapon was in a small container in the back of the refrigerator. His grandmother's special seasoning blend, made from Korean peppers that had been dried in the mountain air and ground with salt from the Yellow Sea. She had sent the precious mixture through diplomatic courier, along with a note that said simply, "For victory and honor." Tomorrow, representatives from across the galaxy would taste not just Korean food, but the essence of what made humanity special. Their ability to take simple things and transform them through care, tradition, and love into something that could touch the heart as well as feed the body. The competition would be won or lost on flavor, but June knew they were really fighting for something much more important. They were fighting for the idea that there were many ways to be advanced, many ways to create beauty, many ways to show what a culture truly valued. As he finally headed to his quarters for a few hours of rest, June felt ready. Tomorrow, the galaxy would learn what human cooking could really accomplish. The main amphitheater of New Geneva Station had never seen anything like this. Thousands of beings from dozens of species filled the seats, while galactic media crews positioned their equipment for the best views. The air hummed with excitement and tension as 4 cooking stations were prepared on the central stage. June stood at the human station, wearing his best chef's coat, with the Earth flag embroidered on the shoulder. His team was arranged around him like soldiers preparing for battle. Tay checked the portable fermentation unit one more time. Mira reviewed her notes on judge preferences. Davy organized their cooking tools with military precision. Hannah spoke quietly with the neutral referees about timing and presentation rules. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings," announced the competition moderator, a tall being from the peacekeeping Neutral Alliance. "Today we witness the Great Galactic Culinary Challenge. 4 teams will present their finest cuisine to be judged by representatives of 5 neutral species." The judges were an impressive sight. The Xanthari delegate had 6 arms and taste organs that looked like flower petals. The Kef representative was a floating cloud of gas that could somehow experience molecular flavors. The Vraxi judge had crystal formations growing from their head that sparkled when they encountered interesting tastes. The other 2 judges were from species June had never seen before, but Mira had assured him they all had sophisticated taste systems. "Team Vorthak will present first," the moderator announced. Ambassador Vexthar and his team had constructed what looked more like a laboratory than a kitchen. Crystalline towers rose from their station, each one glowing with different-colored lights. Mathematical formulas scrolled across floating displays as the Vorthak worked in perfect synchronization. "We present the Harmonic Mineral Symphony," Vexthar announced as his team placed geometric formations on serving platters. Each crystal contains precisely calculated nutritional elements in mathematically perfect ratios. The flavors progress through the Fibonacci sequence, creating logical taste architecture. The judges sampled carefully. The Xanthari's petal organs opened and closed as they analyzed the molecular structure. The Kef cloud swirled thoughtfully. The Vraxi crystals sparkled with interest. "Remarkable precision," commented the lead judge. "The nutritional balance is flawless. The flavor progression follows clear mathematical principles." "Thank you," Vexathar replied with obvious satisfaction. "This demonstrates what true cuisine can achieve when freed from chaotic emotional interference." June felt his jaw clench at the obvious reference to human cooking, but he kept his expression neutral. "Team Glimari presents next," the moderator announced. Lumina Prime and her energy beings had created something that looked more like art than food. Streams of pure light flowed between crystalline containers, forming patterns that hurt to look at directly. The energy formations pulsed and shifted like living things. "We offer transcendent energy sustenance," Lumina Prime announced, her voice like singing crystals. "Pure nutritional energy freed from the limitations of physical matter. Each pattern contains perfect harmony between consumption and spiritual elevation." The judges who could perceive energy wavelengths began to glow as they sampled the light-based food. Even the physical judges seemed affected, their forms shimmering slightly as they absorbed the energy patterns. "Extraordinary," murmured one judge. "The energetic resonance is perfect. This transcends physical taste entirely." June watched his competitors with growing concern. Both presentations had been technically flawless, demonstrating abilities that human cooking could never match. "Team Krulon Collective presents third," the moderator continued. The insectoid beings moved like a single organism as they unveiled their creation. 50 individuals had worked together to create dishes that seemed to shift and change depending on who was looking at them. The food appeared different from every angle, creating an optical illusion that was both beautiful and disturbing. "We present unified taste experience," spoke the collective in their thousand-whisper voice. "Individual perception creates chaos. Our food provides perfect harmony through shared experience. Each judge will taste what the collective intends, not what individual confusion suggests. As the judges sampled the crouton food, something strange happened. Their expressions became synchronized, as if they were all experiencing exactly the same flavors. The effect was impressive and slightly unsettling. "Fascinating," said the lead judge, speaking in unison with the others. "Perfect harmony of experience, no individual variation or interpretation." Now it was humanity's turn. June looked at his simple cooking station with its traditional pots and pans, its earthenware serving dishes, its handmade chopsticks. Compared to crystal towers, energy patterns, and hive mind synchronization, it looked primitive. But that was exactly the point. "Team Earth presents last," announced the moderator. June stepped forward, his grandmother's seasoning blend in his pocket like a good luck charm. "Honored judges, we offer something different. Not mathematical perfection, not energy transcendence, not collective harmony. We offer the story of humanity told through food." He began with the kimchi, explaining how Korean ancestors created fermentation to survive harsh winters, how each family developed their own variations over generations, how the simple combination of vegetables, salt, and thyme could create complex flavors that improved with age. "This kimchi represents adaptation," June said as the judges tasted Thai's innovative creation. "Our ability to take traditional methods and improve them when we encounter new possibilities." The Zenthari judges' petals opened wide, detecting flavor, compounds that seemed to surprise them. The kef cloud swirled with colors June had never seen before. The Vraxi crystals began pulsing in complex rhythms. Next came the soup, rich with bones that had simmered for days. "This represents healing and comfort," June explained. "The patience to create something nourishing from simple ingredients. The care we show for each other when times are difficult." The banchan came next, small dishes that seemed simple, but each carried its own story. "These side dishes represent community," June said. "No single flavor dominates. Each contributes to the whole, like individuals in a family or society." The bulgogi was next, marinated beef that had been grilled to perfection. "This represents celebration and joy, the flavors we create when we have something to be grateful for." With each dish, June explained not just what the judges were tasting, but why it mattered. How food connected people across time and space. How recipes carried memories and love from one generation to the next. How sharing a meal turned strangers into family. Finally, it was time for the mandu. June had made them fresh that morning, each dumpling folded by hand using techniques passed down through 5 generations of his family. As he lifted the steamer lid, aromatic steam filled the amphitheater. The smell was rich and complex, carrying hints of pork, vegetables, and something indefinable that was pure comfort. "These dumplings represent the heart of human cuisine," June said quietly. "Not just the ingredients, but the love that goes into making them. My grandmother taught me this recipe when I was 7 years old. She learned it from her grandmother, who learned it from hers. Each woman added her own touch, her own story, her own love." He placed one dumpling on each judge's plate. "When you taste this, you taste not just food, but 5 generations of Korean women who found ways to feed their families with whatever they had, who turned simple ingredients into expressions of love, who believed that sharing food was sharing life itself." The amphitheater fell completely silent as the judges tasted the mandu. For long moments, nothing happened. Then the kef cloud began to shift through colors June had never imagined. The Vraxi crystals pulsed in patterns that seemed almost musical. The Zenthari judges' petals trembled as if moved by wind. "Remarkable," whispered the lead judge. "I taste not just flavors but emotions, memories, stories spanning generations." Another judge added, "The food carries information beyond nutrition, beyond taste. It carries love, Ambassador Vexthar stepped forward, his crystalline form reflecting the stage lights in sharp, angry patterns. This is exactly what I warned about. Emotional contamination of proper cuisine. These primitive techniques overwhelm rational flavor. Analysis with sentimental manipulation. But something was happening in the audience. Beings who had never shown interest in human food were moving closer to the stage, drawn by the aromas still rising from the human station. Even some of the other competitors seemed distracted, glancing toward the Mandu with expressions that looked almost like hunger. "The judges will now deliberate," announced the moderator. As the judges withdrew to discuss their decision, June felt a strange mixture of pride and anxiety. They had done everything they could. They had told humanity's story through food, shared the best of their culture with beings who might never understand it. Now they could only wait to see if love could triumph over logic. While the judges deliberated in private, tension filled the amphitheater like thick smoke. June sat with his team at their station, trying to stay calm as representatives from hundreds of species waited for the results. The other competing teams showed their confidence in different ways. The Vorthok stood in perfect formation, their crystalline bodies reflecting light in mathematical patterns. The Glimari floated in elegant spirals, their energy forms pulsing with serene colors. The Krulon collective maintained absolute stillness, their hive mind processing the competition in ways individual beings could not understand. "How long do you think they will take?" Tay asked quietly, fidgeting with his chef's hat. "As long as they need," June replied, though he felt just as anxious. "Good decisions take time." Mira was watching the audience through her translator interface. "Something interesting is happening. Look at the crowd." June followed her gaze and saw what she meant. Despite their public dismissal of human cuisine, representatives from various species kept glancing toward the human cooking station. A young Vorthak engineer was standing closer than the others, his crystalline form shifting colors in what June had learned indicated curiosity. Several Glimari scouts had broken away from their main group and were floating near the stage, their energy patterns flickering with unusual intensity. "They are smelling our food," Davy observed. "Even the ones who said human cooking was primitive." "Smell is the most honest sense," June said, remembering his grandmother's words. "You cannot lie to your nose." That was when Ambassador Vexthar approached their station, the massive crystalline being moved with obvious reluctance, his form reflecting the stage lights in sharp, uncomfortable patterns. Other Vorthak watched him with what appeared to be disapproval. "Human chef," Vexthar said, his voice like breaking glass. "Ambassador," June replied respectfully, standing to face the alien leader. "I must ask you something." Vexthar's form shifted colors rapidly, indicating internal conflict. "Your food produces sensations I do not understand. When I tasted your dumpling, I experienced something the Vorthak do not typically encounter." "What kind of sensations?" Hana asked diplomatically. "Memories that are not mine," Vexthar admitted, quietly. "Images of comfort, of safety, of being cared for. The Vorthak develop our young in crystalline matrices that provide perfect nutrition and protection. We do not experience the concept of being fed by others out of love." June felt his anger toward the alien leader beginning to soften. That is what food means to humans. Not just nutrition, but care, connection, a way of showing love without words. "This is what troubles me," Vexthar continued. "My species values logic and precision above all else. These emotional experiences should be meaningless to me. Yet when I tasted your food, I felt something I can only describe as longing." The conversation was interrupted by commotion near the judges' chambers. The deliberation was taking longer than expected, and some beings in the audience were becoming restless. Media representatives were interviewing random spectators about their predictions for the winner. "The Vorthak mathematical precision will surely triumph," declared a trade representative from the Outer Rim. Logic always defeats chaos. The Glimari. Energy patterns transcend physical limitations, countered an academic from the inner worlds. Pure nutrition without the messiness of organic matter. But not everyone agreed. A group of younger beings from various species had gathered near the human station, drawn by the lingering aromas of the Korean feast. "I have never smelled anything like this," said a small, furry creature June did not recognize. "It makes me think of home, even though I have never been to Earth." "That is the point," Tay said with a smile. "Good food reminds everyone of home, even if they grew up somewhere completely different." As the hours passed, something unexpected began happening. The strict separation between species that normally characterized galactic gatherings started breaking down. Beings who had never spoken to each other began sharing stories about their own food traditions. A Glimari scout described energy patterns that reminded them of their homeworld's aurora. A Krulon individual broke away from their collective to ask about human fermentation techniques. Ambassador Vexthar remained near the human station, his crystalline form gradually shifting to calmer colors. "May I ask about your grandmother?" he said suddenly. June was surprised by the personal question. "What would you like to know?" "You spoke of her during your presentation. She taught you to cook. This is how humans transfer knowledge?" "One way," June replied. "But more than knowledge. She taught me that cooking is an act of love, that feeding someone well is one of the purest ways to care for them." "The Vorthak do not have grandmothers in the way you describe," Vexithar said slowly. "Our knowledge is transferred through crystalline data matrices, perfect and complete, but without the emotional connections you describe." "That sounds efficient," Hana said diplomatically. "Efficient, yes. But when I tasted your dumpling, I understood something was missing from that efficiency." Vexthar paused, his form shimmering with uncertainty. "I experienced what it might feel like to be loved by someone who came before, to carry forward not just knowledge, but care." The conversation was interrupted by a disturbance near the Krulon station. Several individual Krulon had broken away from their collective to examine the remaining human food samples. This was apparently unprecedented behavior that was causing confusion among their hive mind. "Individual curiosity is disrupting collective harmony," the main Krulon voice announced with obvious distress. "Human food creates desire for separate experience. Is that necessarily bad?" asked one of the separated individuals, speaking in their own voice for perhaps the first time in their life. The question sent ripples of shock through the Krulon delegation. Individual thought was not supposed to exist in their society. Meanwhile, the Glimari were experiencing their own crisis. Several of their energy beings had tried to recreate the human food experience using pure energy, but found they could not replicate the emotional resonance that came from physical ingredients. "Prepared with care and tradition, we can simulate the nutritional patterns," Lumina Prime admitted to her fellow Glimari. "But we cannot simulate the love." It was at this moment of growing chaos that the judges finally emerged from their deliberation chamber. The lead judge looked exhausted, as if the decision had been more difficult than expected. "After extensive discussion and analysis," the judge announced, "we have reached our conclusion." The amphitheater fell silent. Thousands of beings held their breath as the judge prepared to speak. "However, before we announce the winner, there is an unusual situation we must address." The judge gestured toward the human cooking station, where one last dumpling remained on a warming tray. It had been set aside as a backup, but now it sat alone under the stage lights, still steaming slightly and filling the air with its rich aroma. "Multiple delegates have expressed interest in sampling this final piece," the judge continued. "This has created a diplomatic complication, as formal tasting was supposed to end with the judge samples." Ambassador Vexithar stepped forward. "I request permission to taste that dumpling." "As do we," said Lumina Prime for the Glimari. "The collective also desires individual sampling experience," added several Krulon voices, speaking separately rather than in unison. "This is highly irregular," the judge said, looking uncertain. That was when everything went wrong. A young Vorthak engineer, overcome by curiosity and the intoxicating smell of the dumpling, rushed toward the human station. Ambassador Vexthar moved to intercept him, but his path was blocked by several Glimari scouts who had the same idea. Krulon individuals broke ranks entirely, abandoning their collective to join the rush toward the last dumpling. What followed was the most undignified scene in the history of galactic diplomacy. Sophisticated beings from advanced civilizations began pushing, shoving, and grabbing at each other in their desperation to reach the last piece of human food. Crystalline Vorthak clanged against energy form Glimari. Individual Krulon wrestled with their own collective members. Other species in the audience joined the chaos, drawn by curiosity and the infectious excitement. "Stop!" shouted the lead judge. But no one was listening. The last dumpling sat in the center of the growing brawl, a simple piece of dough and filling that had somehow become the most desired object in the galaxy. Beings who had spent the day proclaiming human cuisine primitive were now fighting desperately for just one taste. June watched the chaos with a mixture of horror and amazement. His grandmother's simple recipe had caused a diplomatic incident that would be talked about for generations. "Should we do something?" Tay asked as a Glimari scout accidentally discharged energy into a group of Vorthak, causing them to ring like bells. "What can we do?" Davy replied, his security training warring with the absurdity of the situation. The brawl continued to grow, spreading beyond the competing species to include audience members who had caught the excitement. The galactic media crews captured every moment, broadcasting the dumpling riot to billions of beings across the galaxy. It was the most beautiful disaster June had ever seen, and somehow it proved his point better than any speech or presentation could have. Human food had done something that no mathematical precision, energy transcendence, or collective harmony could accomplish. It had made everyone want the same thing. The Great Dumpling Brawl of New Geneva Station lasted exactly 17 minutes before June Park did the most human thing possible. He walked calmly to his portable cooking station, ignited the burner, and began making fresh dumplings while sophisticated. Galactic citizens fought around him. The sight was so absurd that it gradually brought the chaos to a halt. Ambassador Vexthar stopped mid-swing at a Glimari scout. Krulon individuals paused their wrestling with their own collective. Even the audience members who had joined the fray began to notice the small human figure calmly rolling dough while mayhem continued around him. "What are you doing?" Vexithar asked, his crystalline form ringing with confusion. "Making more dumplings," Jun replied simply, not looking up from his work. "There is enough for everyone. That is what food is supposed to be about." The amphitheater fell silent except for the gentle sounds of June cooking, the sizzle of oil in the pan, the soft thud of dough being rolled, the quiet bubble of steaming water. After hours of tension and competition, these simple sounds felt like peace. "I do not understand," said Lumina Prime, her energy form flickering with uncertainty. "You could have used our conflict to claim victory. Instead, you make more food. For us?" June looked up for the first time, flour on his hands and calm in his eyes. Victory was never the point. Understanding was the point. He continued working as he spoke, his hands moving with the automatic precision that came from years of practice. "You called our food primitive because it carries emotion. You said we were chaotic because we adapt and change. You claimed we were undeveloped because we value individual expression alongside community harmony." Tay moved to help, seamlessly falling into the rhythm of preparation they had practiced thousands of times. Mira began setting up small plates for distribution. Davy organized the serving area with military efficiency. Hana prepared to translate for anyone who needed help understanding. But look what happened, June continued. Mathematical precision led to fighting over resources. Energy transcendence created desire for physical experience. Collective harmony broke down when individuals wanted something different. Our supposedly primitive food made you all want the same thing: connection. The first batch of fresh dumplings came out of the steamer, and the aroma that had started the brawl once again filled the amphitheater. This time, instead of rushing forward, the assembled beings waited quietly. The real secret of human cuisine, June said as he began plating the dumplings, is not complexity or technique or even flavor. It is sharing. Every human dish is improved when it brings people together. He handed the first plate to Ambassador Vexathar. The crystalline being accepted it with something that might have been reverence. The flavors are not just chemical reactions, June explained. They are invitations. Invitations to sit together, to share stories, to understand each other. When my grandmother made these dumplings during the war, she was not just feeding hungry people. She was creating hope, building community, proving that even in the darkest times, people could take care of each other. He handed plates to Lumina Prime and the Krulon individuals who had broken from their collective. Food is a bridge between different worlds, different cultures, different ways of thinking. It does not matter if you are made of crystal or energy, or part of a hive mind. When you share a meal, you share part of your life. The judges, who had been watching the scene with fascination, finally stepped forward. The lead judge accepted a dumpling and tasted it slowly. "We have reached our decision about the competition," the judge announced. "While each team demonstrated remarkable technical skill, only one team showed us something we had never experienced before." The amphitheater held its breath. Team Earth wins for innovation in emotional resonance and cultural integration. But more importantly, they have taught us all something valuable about what food can really accomplish. The announcement triggered cheers from the human delegation and respectful acknowledgement from most of the audience. But June barely heard it. He was watching something more important happening around him. Ambassador Vexathar was sitting next to a young Krulon individual, both of them slowly eating dumplings and attempting conversation across their completely different ways of thinking. Several Glimmeri had dimmed their energy forms to match the calmer atmosphere, creating gentle patterns of light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the eating. Species that had never spoken to each other were sharing tables, comparing their different experiences of the same food. The rigid social barriers that normally separated galactic citizens were melting away like ice in warm soup. "This is what I wanted," June said quietly to his team. "Not to win a competition, but to show them what food could really do." Over the following weeks, the effects of the Great Dumpling Brawl spread throughout the galaxy. News reports initially focused on the diplomatic incident, but gradually shifted to discussing the deeper questions the competition had raised about culture, connection, and what it meant to be advanced. The Vorthak began experimenting with what they called emotional architecture, adding elements to their crystalline cuisine that created feelings as well as nutrition. Ambassador Vexathar visited the human kitchen every day, learning not just cooking techniques, but the stories behind them. The Glimmeri discovered that incorporating physical elements into their energy patterns created new forms of artistic expression. They started hosting transcendence dinners, where energy beings and physical species could share experiences across their different forms of existence. Most remarkably, the Krulon Collective officially recognized individual taste preferences. For the first time in their species' history, they created special chambers where collective members could experience personal food choices while still maintaining their connection to the hive mind. The competition judges proposed the creation of a permanent galactic culinary exchange, where species could share not just their food, but their food stories, traditions, and cultural meanings. The proposal passed the Galactic Council by an overwhelming majority. June was offered the position of director for the new exchange. standing in the same amphitheater where the competition had taken place, now converted into a massive multicultural kitchen. He looked out over dozens of species working together to prepare a shared feast. A young Vorthak was learning dumpling folding from Ty, their crystalline fingers surprisingly delicate with the dough. A Glimari energy being was collaborating with Mira to create visual translations of Korean poetry to accompany traditional dishes. Davi was teaching security protocols to a group of enthusiastic Krulon who wanted to help serve food to large crowds safely. Hana approached with a communication from Earth. "Your grandmother wants to talk to you." The elderly woman's face appeared on the screen, her eyes bright with pride and amusement. "I have been watching the galactic news. You caused quite a stir with my dumpling recipe." "It was your recipe that did it, grandmother. Your love that made the difference." "No, my grandson. It was your courage to share that love with strangers who became family. That is what good cooking really does. It turns the whole galaxy into one big family dinner." As if to prove her point, Ambassador Vexthar approached carrying a plate of his own crystalline creation. "Chef June, I have successfully incorporated emotional resonance into Vorthak mineral cuisine. Would you honor me by tasting it?" June accepted the glowing crystal formation and bit into it carefully. The flavor was unlike anything he had ever experienced. Precise and mathematical, but somehow warm. It tasted like logic learning to love. "It is wonderful," he said honestly. "You have created something completely new." "As you taught me," Vexthar replied. "Food is not about perfection. It is about connection." That evening, as the first official Galactic Culinary Exchange dinner was served to representatives from over 100 species, June stood in the kitchen watching the controlled chaos of preparation. Beings who had been enemies or strangers 6 months ago were now working together, sharing techniques and stories, creating fusion dishes that had never existed before. The dumpling that had started a bee